Welcome back to The Short Game. It's a podcast about short video games. I'm Reagan Kelly, and I am joined by Laura Nash. How are you doing, Laura?
I'm spectacular.
And Shane, my brother Shane Kelly. How are you doing, Shane?
Had a howlin' good week.
Did you? Well, how appropriate.
Or I had a howl of a week.
Keep workshopping the pun, Shane. Let's try it again. You gotta... Were you running with the wolves?
I was hungry like the wolf.
Yes, thank you. And that is because this week we are talking about The Wolf Among Us from Telltale. And we'll get into all the details about it as we go here. But before we dive in, it's been a little while since we had an episode. Almost 2 weeks. Sorry, listeners. Let's catch up. What have you been playing lately?
Yeah, we're hard at work playing video games. For you. We do it for you.
Exhausting.
Horrible, really. Laura, what have you been up to?
Well, I unfortunately wasn't playing a ton of video games. I was directing a one-act play, but I did get to sneak in some board game time, and I somehow talked a group of like 6 people into playing, to buying and purchasing a copy that I didn't pay for of Marrying Mr. Darcy, which is a role-playing board game based on Pride and Prejudice. It is delightful to have, Justin, my boyfriend, played the hell out of Charlotte Lucas, who is the ugly, unfortunate sibling. Like, she's the girl no one really wants because she's, like, plain and not that smart and not that charming. But he somehow just aced this game, and, like, Charlotte Lucas was suddenly, like, the prettiest, hottest, charming, most money. Like, Charlotte was just, like, banging.
Wait, how does this game work? Is it...
So it's all card-based. So you pick out your characters at the beginning, and everyone has some advantages, and then you're going for certain groups of cards on who you get to marry at the end of the game. So I was playing Lizzie Bennet, the heroine of the novel, and she was given +2 charm, 0 dowry, and that's about it. And I knew I had to get up to like 5 charm or 5 wit to attract Mr. Darcy. Because he's like the person I'll get the most points for. But while Charlotte was just amassing this extraordinary, power and prestige, I pull a card and end up eloping accidentally with Mr. Wickham, and I am Mr. Wickham has decided to like elope with me, and I was like, so I had to get out of it. So basically, you play cards, and it's luck. You roll a die. Like there'll be a party card, and everyone rolls a dice, and based on the card, you get different outcomes. Like one of them is like, your neckline is too low, like you get a scandal point, like you lose 1 reputation.
You know what this reminds me of is that one episode of, I think it was Friends, where they were all sitting around playing the like Happy Days board game. It's like, oh, you got a Fonzie point.
But the difference is Happy Days is not about catty bitches, and Pride and Prejudice is. It's about everybody being scheming catty bitches and not having enough eligible men. And that's what this game is about. It's like, oh, you get to go steal a charm point from somebody else, and you like steal her hairbrush, or like you take a comb away, and it's only fun if everyone just agrees to play along. So if you insult, you hear an insult from someone at a party, you get to insult that person. And it's much more fun that way.
That actually sounds kind of like a blast. I would love to play that.
By the end of the game, Justin as Charlotte had like 6 combs in his hair, and he kept brushing his hair out of his face and saying how pretty he was. Like, that's the kind of game this is. It's so much fun.
Justin has very pretty hair.
He does. It's better than mine.
He's got a bit of a Prince Valiant. It's pretty impressive.
Were you guys playing board games and tabletop games due to Tabletop Day?
When was that?
I think it's celebrated this week. I certainly am going to an organized Tabletop Day event tomorrow. I'm really excited about it. I have just bought 2 new board games, but there's a lot of games I'm excited to play on the schedule tomorrow. I'll tell you about 2 games that I'm excited to play that I have bought. One is Evolution, the board game.
He literally just held it up to the camera so we could all see it. He's clearly got it close at hand because he's excited.
I am. Evolution is a dynamic game of survival where players are creating and evolving species, collecting different traits.
So it's what I wanted Spore to be.
It is, and you're competing in a kind of a world where food is scarce, and some of your species can be predators and eat each other, and you get traits like hard shell or horns or long neck, to defend your species. It looks really fun. It's got some really fun bits. And I'm also playing a game. Oops, I dropped it. So that's cool. I also got a game called Patchwork, which I found on a list of some of the best two-player games. And this is a game that I have picked specifically to play with my wife, Julia, because she is toe-to-tip addicted to 1010. Have you guys seen 1010?
No, what is that?
1010 is a mobile game that I honestly recommend. It's kind of a similar vein to Tetris in that you're trying to arrange Tetramino-style pieces, except in a 10 by 10 grid to make lines across in either direction, and you arrange the pieces any way you want. You lose when you run out of space in the grid for new pieces. It's a fun game, but Patchwork is a game about making a quilt, which is just a hard-fought battle between two players, designed specifically for two players, trying to make quilts to take up a grid. So I thought it might be a good way to take advantage of the skills she has in arranging tetraminos on a grid, which she does constantly on her cell phone, which is amazing. Her high score at 1010 is nothing to laugh at. It's insane. So I'm very excited to try out those two games. And I think I don't want to neglect to mention that I have a milestone, a tabletop gaming milestone that I achieved this week. It? And that is that I dungeon mastered 3 days in 1 week.
I was a part of one of those. You're doing a great job. Thanks.
And I won't go to any detail because I think probably that would be belaboring the point, but it was a victory nonetheless.
The main reason that the show has been a little inconsistent of late was that I've been doing a lot of traveling. I was in Canada for 8 days, or first Canada, then Dallas, Texas for a wedding. So I've been all over the place, and I have not been able to sit down and play a lot of video games. But I brought my Vita with me. I was very excited about it, but I was disappointed because the game I've been wanting to play on the Vita, the game I pretty much bought my Vita to play, didn't come out until like a couple days after I got back, and that's Severed. I was really, really looking forward to playing it. And I got home, woke up the morning that Severed was released, went on the PlayStation Store on my computer, bought it, clicked download to Vita, and then thought, oh, well, where is my Vita? I'd left it on the plane. So I'm pretty behind.
Oh, no.
I know. It was the worst. I left my Vita on a plane, but I immediately, pretty much, as soon as I realized that it was irretrievable, and Southwest is never going to get it back to me. Like, it's a black hole of lost stuff. So I bought a new Vita, and it's the new model, which is nice, or not new, but newer than my original Vita. Very, very nice little device. Had to buy it. Installed Severed, but I only got to do that as of like 10 o'clock last night. So I'm really enjoying what I've played of it so far. But so far, I haven't really played any more of it than I played at the sort of demo event at PlayStation Experience earlier last year. So I've been really, really excited to play it. I finally got it installed as of last night. So I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much it for me video game wise, though. That's why the show is a little behind, is because I have been away from my computer and traveling the world.
At least you were able to replace your Vita very quickly, thanks to the power of the internet and the power of just
the power
throwing
of being
money
an adult
at the problem.
Exactly. Amazon is really dangerous around here. They have free next day shipping, and sometimes even free same day shipping on a lot of items, and that was what kind of did it. Was once I realized that I wasn't getting the Vita back, I was able to get a new Vita in my hands within like less than 20 hours without leaving the house, which was pretty exciting.
Who wants to do that?
So Reagan, I wanna know what you guys did in this game. So I'm excited to talk about this. I have not actually enjoyed a Telltale adventure game before.
Really?
And that, yeah, no, it's true. I was not a fan of The Walking Dead. I think I was a little...
Oh, I think that we talked about that when we did the episode. But I had forgotten about that.
Yeah, I was a little bit cold on it. I didn't actually go back and complete any more of it than we played for the show, sadly.
Really? That's insane to
Yeah.
me. Wow. Well,
I mean,
okay.
I've only played one episode of Walking Dead as well. It just didn't. I was like, I get it.
So although I was, I got this game on mega sale and I was going to play it for the show because I knew it wasn't like 12 seasons long like The Walking Dead was.
What? Two seasons. Come on.
Also, full disclosure, I do not like The Walking Dead, the TV show. I think it's nerd homework. So that probably informed my take of the game. So
yeah, I'm a big fan of The Walking Dead comics.
Well, yeah, we don't need to kind of explore our thoughts on The Walking Dead. I think The Walking Dead is brilliant.
No re-reviews are required. Please, listeners, go back and listen. But I have read a ton of the comics for both The Walking Dead and Fables. So what I was expecting was that I was going to have another experience like I had with The Walking Dead, which was where I love the comic books. I read over 80 issues of The Walking Dead before I played the game, and I found the game a disappointment. I've read at one point I was current on Fables, but I know they continue to crank those things out. But I've read almost as much Fables as I did of The Walking Dead. And I found myself to be a big Fables fan, so I was kind of worried to play this game. I picked up a $15 copy of it when it went on sale at some point, and I had it sitting in my game console for a long time, and I never actually picked it up and played it. So now that we actually picked it up for the game, I was totally shocked how much I loved this version of the Telltale adventure game genre. I feel like it gave me renewed hope for the fact that I think these sort of choice-based games of the Telltale style can actually tell the kind of stories I'm really interested in.
That's really interesting. Like my experience was sort of different. I really, really liked The Walking Dead. I thought it was brilliant. And I don't love the TV show. In fact, I thought the TV show, I agree with you, Laura, that I think the TV show is basically awful. The comics are pretty okay, but I didn't enjoy them as much as Shane did. And I didn't get anywhere near as far in them. I just didn't really enjoy them. I don't even really like zombies as a thing, but I thought that the game was phenomenal and was like a absolute reinvention of adventure games. This game was the follow-up to that, and I played The Walking Dead not that long after it was originally out, and here I am only getting around to really playing the Wolf Among Us really years later, mainly just because I didn't know anything about Fables, and I kind of felt like I would be jumping into something that, like, I've never read the comic books apart from I read a little bit of the first trade with the comics, and I thought it was not good, and I'm told that that's not weird, that it gets better. But I didn't really like the comics, and so I thought I probably wouldn't like this story too much either. It was always one of those things that was sort of like on my list. I really, really like this game as well. I think The Walking Dead, and we'll talk about like exactly how this game differs from The Walking Dead in its approach. I think The Walking Dead is a more important game, and I think in a lot of ways a better game. But this game probably has a better story. Like, this is a really good story. This is a phenomenally good character, good performance, good voice acting, beautiful art. So I think this game is really great, totally worth playing, but different.
And I am Fables completist. I stuck with it to the bitter end on all the trades. Yes, the first one is not good. But I was very nervous to play this game because I knew I liked Fables a lot. The series had just ended or was about to end, and it was kind of that like, oh, is this going to be another entry I'm excited about in the series? Or is it going to be like when I read some of the Jack and Fables spinoff and was like, oh, this is terrible. Because Fables is not good at spinoffs. And I knew this was a prequel.
Or crossovers.
God, the crossover's so bad. Oh, the crossover's so bad. So I was worried that this was going to be adding something to the Fables canon that was subpar. I trusted Telltale. Walking Dead wasn't my jam. The Game of Thrones one has the same problems as anyone writing in the Game of Thrones universe, which is you can't really make sweeping changes because the books are the books. But I like both of the games a lot.
I think the problem is even more pronounced here.
Oh, yeah.
So they had that challenge as well because this is a prequel that involves all of the principal characters of the original Fables game.
Exactly.
Comic.
And I was quite worried because knowing how much the characters need to change over Fables, having them set in stone beforehand, prequels are always scary to me. So that all said, I was really happy that they took the potential in the Fables franchise, the things that I always wanted them to explore, and they took it and ran with it.
They lucked out in a way because the kind of initial setup of Fables has Big B Wolf, the big bad wolf, as a cop. And they play off that a little bit at the start of the comics themselves and throughout, really, because he's the sheriff of Fableville. But having
Fable
that
Fableton.
Fable City, Notting Hill,
Different movie.
Forest. All right. So they lucked out by having the initial kind of setup be so perfect for an adventure game because investigation is the genre that adventure games, I feel, work best in.
Yeah, so Fables is fairy tale characters used to live in another world. There's a big war, so they had to all be refugees, basically, and escape to New York City, where they live in a small area, kind of the Bronx, that has a big protective spell over it, so people don't realize there's weird shit going on. So you get every single character from every fairy tale from every culture living in one space. There's a couple extra bits of lore that enter in this game, like if you don't look like a human, you have to go to a farm in upstate New York. But most of the Fables canon doesn't really matter to this plot. You just need to know you're the big bad wolf, but you're reformed-ish, and now you're the sheriff. So you're the big bad wolf who gets to investigate.
Yeah, you make a good point there. A lot of the fun of this comes from the fact that in addition to Fables, where so much of the story relies on all these interesting kind of stories from traditional literature from other cultures around the world, or maybe you've never heard of this character, and there's a little bit of that in this, especially with the character who sort of creates the inciting incident. No spoilers, but in this, they really rely on folk stories, almost urban legend level stories, so that it's something where the viewer or the player has an immediate way in. You're going to have heard of all of the characters that are involved and have some preconceptions that it'll either confirm or just subvert. So it's really cool.
Yeah, and you get to do a murder mystery noir in like this really cool faux comic style. They take the 3D style that they have for the engine and they apply this like 2D comic overlay on it, and it's all colored like 80s Miami Vice, like the movie Drive. It's gorgeous.
It is gorgeous. I think it's probably the biggest improvement that they made. Like playing The Walking Dead, you could see the art and sort of just graphics of it improve like episode to episode. You could see them really working out the kinks, and by the fifth episode, it looked way better than it did in the first one. But here, they nail it from the first scene, and it looks way better than anything that they'd done up to that point. It's really stylish. You can see the sort of comic book influence. There's bold lines, lots of really interesting, good character choices. It is set in the 80s, which is earlier than most of the Fables comics, being a kind of a prequel. And so they have that kind of 80s vibe to play off of. It's the 80s in New York, and you get these really cool sort of run down looking places. And yeah, just visually, it's super good looking. I think it's probably Telltale's best looking game.
Yeah, I just was so happy that things I'd always wanted them to get into in Fables, but they never had time to, entered into the themes here. Like, there's a thought about class, like which Fables are poor, which ones are rich, who got to inherit money. Like, it's really great for someone who's a fan to get to see that stuff that sandbox played with, because Fables can be so plot driven that it's fun to actually have something else happening. And I don't think you need to be a fan of the comics to like this, because it's very clear that, you know, when they talk about their history with each other, it is literally the big bad wolf talking to one of the three little pigs. Like, it's, you know, the backstory there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a really wonderful thing about this setting, is that, yeah, they don't need to provide you with backstory. You already know every character here. They're just presenting them in these situations that make it very novel and interesting. Like probably my favorite thing about the first episode was when the big bad wolf goes home to his dingy apartment in the Woodlands building, and in walks Colin the pig, who's one of the three pigs. Presumably his brothers are dead, right? So he's now hanging out with the big bad wolf who ate his two brothers. And, you know, he's a literal pig, so he needs help getting booze, for example. You have to choose whether you're going to pour a drink into a cup and sit it on the floor for Colin, or light his cigarette for him. You know, do you feel guilty about your backstory with Colin? It's not really explained, but here he is kind of hanging out with you.
Yeah, it's definitely a scenario that it raised some questions for me about why does the wolf get to stand up when clearly the pig cannot? He has no hands, but how did the pigs build the house?
Well, the wolf gets to stay because he's half north wind, so he... Yeah, I'm not going to get to Fables.
I know. That's what's so fun about the
Shane
comics.
knows.
There's Fables
Is that
canon.
it's-
Great. Okay. Yeah, I have never read any of the canon, the comics, excuse me. Yeah, I have never read any of the comics, but I didn't really feel that was an impediment to enjoying this here. They've really done a great job of making this an accessible thing, and it really made me want to go read the comics. So it's a great in point. If you're the sort of person who enjoys adventure games in the Telltale style, and by now there have been so many games by Telltale and in the imitation of that style that you probably already know if that's your thing. If that's a game style that you...
Welcome to the short game.
Yeah, welcome to the show. If that's a thing that you enjoy, you should probably play this game, and it'll give you a sense of whether you'd be interested in Fables as a whole.
Read the first two trades.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I'm
the first one.
Like, now that we finished this, I'm definitely going to go read the second trade. I didn't finish the first one. I'm thinking about just skipping the rest of it. And in fact, I have the first one on my shelf downstairs, unfinished, because I didn't really dig it. But I'm going to skip it. I'm going to go on to trade 2 and see if because I liked this so much. I want to know what happens to Bigby. We already talked about this at the start, but like, this is a very different game in a lot of ways from The Walking Dead. It really has the Telltale stamp all over it. You know, this was their follow-up to The Walking Dead. This was where they had to prove that The Walking Dead wasn't a fluke. I mean, if you look at everything that Telltale did before The Walking Dead, they had a lot of fans, but they weren't taking the video game world by storm. And then The Walking Dead exploded. And part of that was the source material. It was, popular comics, and there was a television show already on, I think, at that point.
People were thoroughly obsessed with zombies for a few years there.
Yeah. Oh my God. And so it kind of had that going for it. But really, Telltale figured something out with The Walking Dead. Something pretty important about how they could do an adventure game that was going to be different from everything they'd done before. All their work before that was this other thing, and now everything that Telltale's done since has been, how do we do this thing again or improve on it? And this was the first attempt at that, trying to figure out a way to take what they'd learned on The Walking Dead and apply that to a different story. And it is a very different story. So there's a lot of things that this game does that's very different, and some of it I think is an improvement by far. And other things I think are not as good as The Walking Dead, but I think maybe there's some room for that being a matter of taste.
Do you think maybe the difference in how it plays out has a little bit to do with kind of the basic of The Walking Dead being something about constantly punishing and hurting and disempowering the player, and this It's all about restraining like this incredible power. So the player is really empowered and feels like, it's a much happier existence to be Bigby Wolf, no matter how downtrodden he is, than it is to be running from zombies.
I think you're onto something there, but I actually think that it's a bit different because The Walking Dead, you are disempowered as the character, and the player is very disempowered. So you are in line with what's going on. You're barely surviving as a character, and also your options are very limited, and your options as a player are also very limited, and it works.
But I'll counter that Bigby here. So you're playing a almighty God force level of big and bad, who's decided to try to be lawful good. And he is, you get choices constantly to be a bad guy. You can be an asshole, you can be violent, and you, like Bigby, have to make the choice whether you're going to, get your job done, or if you're going to just, beat down doors and hit people at the expense of your investigation. So I would say that you have to make the same choices as Bigby in this game. Your choices are, do I get the information I need, or am I just going to, beat the shit out of this guy?
Yeah, it really is, theme-wise, all about how Bigby wants to use his power. And you can make different choices about that, and it feels pretty flexible. You can decide that Bigby doesn't really care, or you could decide that Bigby really cares how he's seen by his fellow Fables and wants to be a good guy and really restrain his power.
Yeah. So there are scenes in this game where you are the big bad wolf, and you are given chance after chance after chance to be big and be bad. And to essentially wreck places, to Hulk out, to destroy the claw the scenery. And one of the things that I find really interesting about the game is that in those moments, the scene seems to play out very differently depending on what you decide to do. Do you decide to beat someone up, or do you decide to leave them alone? Do you charge in to a fight, or do you hold back? And so those are the kind of choices that you're making in a lot of different games, I guess. But in this, they reward both. It's really neat.
Yeah, there's all sorts of choices that you could make that seem like, and none of these are things that really have a huge effect on the plot, and that's something I could complain about a little bit later. But in the scenes, there's lots of little choices that you can make that are really about just sort of deciding how big and bad you want to be, and the actual repercussions of those choices are really divorced from the action. It may seem at the time oh, that's just a really badass thing to do. I want to look really fucking cool right now. I want to crush the car, or I want to toss the guy through the wall, or whatever. But then people do judge you for those choices, and they react to you differently in later conversations. And the choices are not as earth-shattering, or at least they don't feel as earth-shattering as they would in The Walking Dead, where your choices are usually
so White will remember that.
Yeah, I know. Your choices in The Walking Dead would be things like, do I save this person or this person? Decide right now, because whichever way you choose, that person is going to die in 10 seconds from now, and it's going to be a huge consequence, and you're going to see the consequence immediately. Here, the consequences are a little more vague. Most of your choices, the consequences are more interpersonal, or about your relationships with other characters, and often you don't see the results of them immediately. A lot of the choices you make really only come up much later when you're having conversations in the 4th and 5th episodes with some of the other characters.
It's a little closer to Life is Strange than, some of the teen horror games you've been playing recently.
In some ways, I really like that idea. I like the idea of a game that's all about your relationships with the other characters and how they respond to, how much you restrain yourself, having an effect on how other people see you. But that's the gameplay of this game, is kind of deciding. You're not really deciding what Bigby Wolf does, except in a very small number of situations. You're mostly deciding what kind of person Bigby Wolf is while he does it, and in some ways that's cool, but also I'd say like my biggest criticism about this game is that the pace sometimes feels too fast. Or really, even sometimes the pace just feels wrong. It's not even always that it's too fast. Like if there's a game about your relationships with the other characters, but there's a lot of times where I kind of felt like the game was rushing me along to the next plot point without giving me time to kind of feel out my relationship with the other characters. Like I wanted more opportunity to go and talk to Frog about his kid and try to make things right with Colin and have a conversation with Snow about something other than the case. It felt like it was rushing me along from plot point to plot point sometimes, without kind of giving me the time to, like, with in The Walking Dead, there would be whole periods where you were sort of walking around the motor inn, for example, and you could go and click and talk to this guy, go and talk to that guy, go and talk to the other guy, and even though it was still just a series of dialogue trees, not that different from what you get here, I think I felt a little more invested in it because I was controlling Lee a little bit more, even if it's just the little amount of controlling Lee of like, I'm going to tell him to go walk over there and talk to that person. Here, it really plays out more movie style. I can probably count on one hand the number of times that I actually needed to like control where Bigby was walking, and that made any difference. So I don't know, that it's definitely a different approach to choice here.
Personally, to me, that was a huge improvement. I don't like walking around and trying to figure out what to click on in adventure games. I much prefer the movie approach. Some of my favorite parts of this, having played the full first season, were points where there was like a huge chase sequence that was going on. And you'll probably never hear me say this again, I got really into those QuickTime events.
Yeah, I liked them so much better than the Game of Thrones QuickTime events, which are a lot of like click and drag because you're supposed to be swinging a sword, but I have a trackpad, so it's hell. I was very happy with the QuickTime events in this.
Yeah, they work okay. I don't ever really love QuickTime events, but I'm not one of these people who's like dogmatically against them. I think that's, that sometimes they are the tool that you need for the job. And they totally suit this game in that this is really, there's a lot of parts of this game that are minimally interactive, but really just a movie trying to keep you involved in the action. So some of the fight scenes, some of the chase scenes, there's no, this is not a game where you're steering a car or jumping at the right moment to get from one rooftop to another. It's really just a way of keeping you involved while the game is telling you the more actiony bits of the story, so that then you can get on to the next choices. And it works fine, but you do have to kind of go into this understanding that you're going to be doing some QuickTime events. If you're one of those folks that sees one QuickTime events and quits the game, then maybe this one's not your bag. But you probably already knew that.
There's a nice mix of the magic and the mundane in this game, because you can, sometimes you are clicking around a living room, and sometimes you're clicking around the magical business office with where all the artifacts of all of Fableton live, and talking to a magic mirror. They're in the same game about 30 minutes apart, and it's really fun when you don't know which one is which. Like if you get a tarot card deck, is that actually a magical special tarot card deck, or is that just a normal one? It's really nice to have both of them side by side, and I think the world being so strong is a huge benefit. That is one of the strengths of the Game of Thrones game. It's one that Walking Dead doesn't get to play on as much because it's just, apocalypse world.
Yeah, and they were inventing all their characters for that, where here they had a huge source to draw on.
I'm saying environment building. Like, it's New York in the 80s, which is cool, and it's New York in the 80s with magical stuff in it.
Which is even more cool. Characters that you already know, so much of their story, as we already went through. There's so much that's built in. This is a melting pot plot that is like so perfect.
Yeah, it's not as high stakes because it's it's a murder mystery as opposed to you are going to die.
Yeah.
Bigby's not going to die.
No, and we know that. Like, if you know the comic books, you know Bigby is in.
I died a few times.
That's
right,
true.
But you can restart.
Yeah, you kind of know from the beginning that the major characters here are going to make it all the way through. But really, the question is, who are they going to be when they make it through? And actually, all the characters are really more three-dimensional than you would expect. I think that's kind of like the gimmick. Gimmick is the wrong word for it, but that's kind of the gimmick of Fables. Is like
it is a gimmick.
Yeah, taking these two-dimensional fairy tale characters and making them three-dimensional people by putting them in this, in the quote-unquote real world, and that idea. Like, there's been like 2 or 3 TV shows that have whole hog stolen it already, and this is a brilliant idea, and it works great in all sorts of media, and it's really working here. We should probably just talk a little bit about who our favorite characters are. I mean, like there's so many great little moments in this game with clever inclusions of interesting characters. I mean, Bigby himself is. I was not a Fables guy before I played this game, but and I didn't really get Bigby when I read the comics, but like he's so dynamic, he's so interesting, which is weird for just being a fairy tale character, but he's so interesting here. He's got I just think Bigby Wolf is really, really great. Oh, and the voice acting performance here is great, by the way. Like, everybody was great, but Adam Harrington does the voice here of both Bigby Wolf and the Woodsman, and he's great as both and totally distinct. And I would never have realized he was doing both voices if I hadn't looked it up.
I mean, I loved the little bits of side characters from Fables that I got to see, but I was especially happy that I got to see Buffkin, who is the one of the flying monkeys from Oz. Who
is that what he was?
Librarian of the who works in the sheriff office, whose job it is to fly to the top shelves and get the right books, but he's always stealing people's booze. And yeah, that's,
to be fair, they keep bringing in bottles of booze.
They do. They keep bringing bottles of booze and then leave it at their desks, and then they're like, "Where did the booze go?" And Mifkin's like, "Sorry, I have wings."
Yeah,
what did you expect me to do?
I'm glad they didn't cut out all the drinking and smoking.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I think Buffkin is an incredible character. I like some of the new characters. There's. I don't want to spoil anything, though, because there's some characters that all my favorite characters were not in episode 1. All my favorite characters were really fully introduced in 2 and 3, I think.
Oh, so something we talk about how in adventure games barely anybody looks at the menu stuff, but in this one you can look up the story behind all of the fables, and actually not get too spoiled on comics. Because it's a prequel. But there's also, you can look, when you look it up, there's a whole list from 1 to 5 of all the people you meet. And you can just look at the roster of all the different Fable characters you've met along the way. So probably because it was episodic and you had to remember who was who. They do it in the comic as well. They have a first page, the first 2 pages are just portraits of people and who they are. So you know who is who, but they should do that for X-Men. But I think that it just speaks to how many good characters they've got, that there are 60 or something characters in this book that are just tiny mentions, Beast, Beauty, Toad, even the Frog Prince. Everybody gets to have a little appearance.
I love Toad. He was... And he's from, that's Toad from Wind in the Willows, right? I'm not mixing.
Toad of Toad Hall.
I thought that was a Disney property.
No, it was a
I mean, I know there was a book, but wouldn't that still be in
The Wind in the Willows?
When did it come out? It must. I mean, it would have to be
public domain.
Is it? Okay, I had no idea. I thought it was more
Disney
recent.
Wants
than
you
that.
to think that everything older than 100 years old is a Disney property.
Yeah, I mean, they really have managed to seize the public domain.
That's how Ichabod Crane's in this book, even though he's an American folk tale.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I thought they did a really wonderful job of introducing some new characters and setting up characters from the comics in a way that didn't interfere with the comics, but still left them room to grow and change and be interesting. Bigby is incredibly dynamic. Snow, I thought, was really interesting. Snow White.
Yeah, they show you a little bit of the underbelly of Fabletown in this. And all the characters that they introduce in that way are really delights, and none of them come in the first episode. So again, I won't spoil anything for Laura, but you've got some monsters and some big names or famous names that get introduced, and all of them are done in ways that really subvert their original story of origin. So really entertaining stuff.
So the game starts with a quick title card that says, this is Fableton, and, this is the world you're in. And that's all you get. And then you, as Bigby, walk into the apartment building, and you meet this toad, and the toad wants to, you basically cite him for not being in human form, and you have a little conversation. And meanwhile, there's just, soot falling from the ceilings. There's clearly something going on upstairs, and you're just kind of harassing this toad. He's like, no, just get upstairs. You walk up, and the woodsman, yes, that woodsman, the woodsman from Little Red Riding Hood, is, just beating up on this poor innocent girl. And so you get into a fight with him. He got all this history. It's a really energetic fight. The girl is kind of, she's sad but sassy. And then you get to choice if you can throw him out the window. I threw him out the window.
Oh, of course.
And you land on this cab with this crash. And then you get kicked into this great title sequence, the opening credits, which after seeing this, I was like, Alias Jessica Jones totally ripped this off, I feel.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Really stylized, bluesy, a lot of color, a lot of walking around New York. And it's such an energetic start.
A little bit of 80s without being dated.
Yeah, it's got action, it's got intrigue with this mysterious lady with a ribbon around her neck. And you've already established that everybody has a history in this world.
And it does an incredibly elegant job of explaining the setting to you without making a big deal out of it. They do show that title card at the beginning, but, your first conversation with the toad, first off, this ain't Kansas. There's a toad here. What's up? And the conversation where he cites him for being out of glamour, you immediately know, okay, these fables, they're living in New York, but they do it by magic. We understand now, how this is quote unquote possible. And then the fight with the woodsman, then, okay, now we're actually in an adult story. We're not in a fairy tale exactly anymore. We're taking these characters into a place that we haven't seen them before. And
bashing them with lamps.
And boom. And then you get the great shot where his eyes turn yellow. He bares his teeth. You know that under the surface of this, kind of sexy cop is actually a wolf. He's not a werewolf. He is an actual literal wolf. Really cool setup. And I just think the first scene of this game.
Did you just say he was sexy?
Yeah, I was like, sexy wolf, please tell me more.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a broad-minded guy. He's got something going for him. He's a good-looking character, right? And
animal attraction.
Well, actually, I don't know if you guys know this about me, but I kind of have a thing for wolves. Not in a furries kind of way. I just have a collection of wolf-related stuff. I just think wolves are cool. I don't know. I'm going to sound like a huge loser. I have a bunch of wolf t-shirts. Not that I wear in an ironic way. An ironic way. It's ironic. But I just think wolves are cool.
No,
right?
love of wolves, it's ironic.
You just wanted to make sure that we knew how much you liked wolves. So
it's totally ironic how much you like wolves. Mm-hmm.
Just sharing.
There's no way that I can explain this without sounding like a real weirdo.
I like wolves too. I have a lot of favorite animals. I have favorite colors too, but mostly I haven't thought about them much since I was 10.
Shut up! I like wolves.
I didn't mean to wolf shame you.
Whether or not you've read Fables, it doesn't really matter. I think this is a great game. If you like adventure games, if you like fairy tales, if you like noir, I think it's a little different than Walking Dead, as we discussed, but it's super fun.
It's a great story. It's in a lot of ways, it's a better story than The Walking Dead. It's one of the best stories that I've seen done in an adventure game, and I think it's actually probably the second best thing that Telltale has done compared to Walking Dead. And I say that like it's better than, for me, I thought better than Walking Dead Season 2. It's up there with Walking Dead, and whether you like this or that better is going to be entirely a matter of personal taste. And they are both phenomenal games, and they are like...
I really hope they do a second season of this.
I would love that, but it's really looking like no, huh? Like they probably would have announced something by now, don't you think?
Well, Fables just ended, and so the creator of Fables was really busy wrapping up the series. So if they were to announce it, I think it will be in the next, pretty soon, or not at all. Next year is probably their time limit.
Yeah, I don't know whether this was as big a success for them in terms of just, units sold or what have you. I don't know if they felt the demand for a second season the way they did with The Walking Dead. But I think this was really a totally good follow-up to that. They got these two licenses like at the same time, and I think it's just sort of by chance that they ended up doing The Walking Dead first, and I think that these are kind of companions to each other in a way. I would love to see more of this, even if I don't know where it would fall in the chronology of Fables. Like, would they pick a different character to follow, or do you think? Or
well, there's plenty of time in the series to do a parallel story.
I'd really like to see that.
We gotta hope. Next week, we're talking about a game that I'm really excited about because it's scratching all my nostalgic itches. It's Warbits. We started playing it, and then the following week, it got featured in the App Store. So I'm really excited to talk about it and see what you guys think. I'm really enjoying playing it. Mano a mano, Shane versus Reagan versus Nate. I've yet to start a game with Laura, so I'm pointing at you. But if you, the listeners, are excited to want to even give it a try, this is a chance for you to try playing with us. You could play under the hashtag short game, and maybe we'll play a round or two with you before the show.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. If you're playing Warbits, start a game with hashtag short game, and that'll connect you up with us. I'm looking forward to playing it with more folks because I'm really, really enjoying the game. We'll talk more about the game next week. And we might talk a little bit about other asynchronous multiplayer games. So if you have a favorite turn-based asynchronous multiplayer game, whether that's a play by email or an iPhone game with integration like that, the Words with Frenzy style, as some people will think of it. If you have a favorite game in that style, let us know, because we're going to be talking not just about Warbits, but a little bit about other games in that style too. I've been your host, Reagan Kelly, and you can find me on the internet at twitter.com/ReaganK. That's RayGank. Or you can find
at TWITTER.com for spelling things out.
Yep, and also at the website of the show to which you have just listened. That's www.theshortgame.net, where you'll find a contact form, and we'd like to hear from you. If you want to let us know about those asynchronous multiplayer games, that's where you do it. There's also our Twitter, @_shortgame. And leave us a review on iTunes. That's the thing on your computer that you click on every now and then when you want to sync your iPod. Leave us a review there. We really, really like that. Laura, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Laura J. Nash.
And Shane, where can people find you?
I don't want to be found, but if you must find me, I'm on Twitter at 8bitshane.
And thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Short Game.